Okay, it's 2 o'clock and let's start. Hello and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Mobile-Friendly Booklists. I'm Geeta Nathan. I will be the moderator for today's webinar, and joining me today to present the webinar is my colleague, Ryan Quinn. And before we start today, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You're listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you prefer to join over the phone, you can just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. And what you see on the screen is just a sample webinar, so please don't use that. Once you select phone call, you will get your own access code. And now let's go over some quick audio and video checks. If you can hear me and view my screen, please click on the small hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. By hitting on the hand icon, you're letting us know that you can actually view my screen and hear me. Okay, I think we are good to proceed. All participants are in listen-only mode, but if you have questions during the presentation, you can go in and enter your questions into this question pane on your control panel. We will collect all these questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And today's webinar is being recorded. The recording will be posted on the IndieCommerce Webinar Center on bookweb.org. Now let's talk a little bit about today's webinar topic. What we are offering is an out-of-the-box solution for creating mobile-friendly booklists. Almost all our members have booklists on their site. They have at least one booklist. It could be a staff picks, bestseller, a new release list, etc. These lists might exist in their own pages, but not very obvious to the site visitors. A sample of those lists can also be displayed on the homepage in the form of a grid of cover images. This is where the Drupal Views comes in handy. Views is in the top 5 most downloaded Drupal modules. It allows you to organize and display content in many ways without having to write in a single line of code. But it has a bit of a learning curve. The Views interface has lots of configuration options. This has kept many from using Views. We noticed that most of our members can create book lists, and they can also configure blocks and pages with ease. So we developed this new out-of-the-box feature for building mobile-friendly book lists. The view is already created by us, and all that is left for the stores to do is create the book list and configure the blocks, which they are already comfortable doing. So now let me hand it over to Ryan, who will continue with the presentation.
Muted.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Geetha, for that lovely introduction. Before we get started, I want to show you exactly what you're going to be learning about today. So I'm going to play you a short video of how current members are using this feature. Okay, everyone, it seems that that video is a little low and can't be heard clearly. So we are going to move on and I will demo the sites instead. Let's switch back. So the first store is Sparta Books, and they've chosen to display these on their site using the 3 default grid options. Oh, there's our pop-up. So for them, they've chosen to feature these as a grid of new adult titles, new children's books, and new YA titles. Another store using this is Browsers Olympia. They're actually using it in multiple places. Let's go ahead and take a look at their site. So for Browsers Olympia, they're also using it on their front page, but they've actually customized it. So they're using it for the first 3 blocks, and they've added additional blocks as well to add several different categories of books to their front page. In addition to using it on their front page, they're also using it in a second place for staff picks. So when you click on their staff picks page, you can now see an entirely different set of books. So those are 2 ways in which members are currently using them. Let's learn a little bit about how they're creating it. Here you have our IndieCommerce Bookshop website. One of the first things you need to know about this feature is that it is just that, a feature. And if you're not familiar with the features page, you can navigate to it through Store, Configuration, Account Information and Preferences, Store Features. On this page is a list of all the features that can be enabled for your IndieCommerce website. There's a similar page for IndieLite users as well. The most recent features will be listed at the top under the Amazing New Features category. And then below that, all of the features fall into different categories: content tools, e-commerce, e-commerce payment options, e-commerce shipping, and then other, along with some other options like service links, spam control, and views. So if you're not familiar with this page, you'll want to navigate here and take a look at the possible options, read their descriptions, and if you'd like to have something enabled for your site, check the Enabled button here, Enable this feature, and then scroll down to the very bottom of the page and click Send Request ABA. We'll receive an email request then to enable that feature for you. We will then enable it, and we will confirm with you once it's been enabled, along with providing any additional information that's needed for your configuration of that feature. In this case, we're referring to the mobile-friendly book list feature. This provides 3 responsive grid view templates that can be used for book lists so that you can easily fill in the book list and have them displayed on your site. Let's go ahead and take a look at this now. And any questions you have will be addressed at the end of this webinar during the Q&A session. Okay, so when we enable the mobile-friendly book list module for you, 3 pages of content are automatically created. You can find these pages by coming to Content, and then we're going to filter it. So the front page book list titles can be found by filling in the title and clicking Apply. That filtered it out so that I can see just the 3 pages that this module created by default. We have front page book list 1, 2, and 3. To edit them, to customize the covers displayed, you will select the Edit button, and you can scroll down to the Book feature. This should be fairly familiar for most of you, as you're all pretty familiar with creating book lists on your site. There are two ways in which you can edit this. You can change each ISBN individually. I'm going to go ahead and change the first one here. So I've put in a new ISBN. I am clicking into the white area to generate it to pull in the new option. And so now it has a different book. Or IndieCommerce users can update the list in bulk by clicking on the Book List tab at the top here. That gives you a text field in which you can enter in the number of book lists you'd like to display. So I'm going to go ahead and select 6 from my list here. And I'm going to highlight them all and replace them. Now if I click Save, I have a regular standard book list with 6 different titles. By default, the mobile-friendly book list module is limited to 6 titles per list and per display. If you are an IndieCommerce user, you can adjust that, which we'll get into a little later. Coming back to content, you would continue on with adjusting your front page book list 2 and 3 as well until you had customized all the books on each of those book lists. Once you had done so, you would locate the blocks that are automatically created by the mobile-friendly book list module. To do that, you come to Structure and Blocks. And these blocks are going to default to the disabled section first because they have not been configured to display on your site yet. So if we scroll down here to the disabled section, you'll see that there are 3 blocks, front page book list 1, 2, and 3, and each one is going to need to be configured. We'll start with front page book list 1, and I'm selecting the Configure button. And here's the block title, front page book list 1. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to my region settings first and decide where I want to place that. So more often than not, you'll use the content region. So I'm going to set this to content. And then you want to make sure you set your visibility settings. In this case, you want to restrict it to certain pages. For today's example, I'm placing this only on my front page. So I made sure that the show block on specific pages is set to only the listed pages. And I'm confirming that front is entered into the field here. I'll click Save Block. And I will repeat that steps for front page book list 2 and 3 as well. So here I am configuring front page book list 2. I'm again setting the region. My visibility settings are correct. And I'm clicking Save Block. And I have one more to go for front page book list 3. I'll select Configure, set my region, confirm my visibility settings are set correctly, and click Save. Now, if I visit my front page, each of my blocks is placed here. But I did not adjust my titles. So I'm still seeing them as front page book list 1, 2, and 3. To change that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to Structure Blocks. And we can edit those titles. So for front page book list 1, I'm going to call these my new and noteworthy. I'm going to save my page. Save my block. And I'm just going to repeat that to name front page book list 2. then we'll do front page book list 3. So now, if I see them on my front page, they have the appropriate titles. You can also reorder how they're being displayed. So if you come to Structure and Blocks, you can use the drag and drop icon to move their order. So for instance, if I wanted front page book list 2 to actually be the first in the list, just by dragging that up, you can see it's highlighted in yellow currently. And scrolling down, I can save that and go back to my home page. So now my cookbook best sellers are above my new and noteworthy titles. Some of the customizations that IndieCommerce users can make are to adjust the number of blocks. So instead of having 3 blocks, you could have 4. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we would do that. You would come to Content, Add Content, Page. To keep things tidy, we're going to follow the same naming format. So we're going to call this front page book list 4. And we don't want to add any body description here, so we're going to move right down to books. And again, I can either do this one by one. So let's select an ISBN, paste the ISBN into the field, click into the white area to make the system pull it in. And I'm going to save this with that one. But you can also add them in bulk. So I'm going to view this page. Select the book list tab. And go ahead and add in another 5. Now for any IndieCommerce users not familiar with the bulk book list option, it is a feature that you can request to be enabled from the features page. So here's my 4th book list. And it's just a standard book list. So now I want to add it to the view display. I'm going to go to Structure, Views, and select my front page book list view. And here are my 3 views already created. Front page book list 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to go ahead and clone the first one. I'm going to change the display name to be front page book list 4. Select Apply. And I'm going to change my block name as well so that it matches and is called front page book list 4 here. Now, currently, if you look at this, it's pulling in the books from my first book list. And in this case, I want it to pull in from my 4th book list. So to do that, I need to know the node ID of that 4th book list. To find the node ID, you can go to your content page, select Edit for the page that contains your book list, and look in the URL. Here you will see that it says node / and a number. That number is your node ID. So for our front page book list 4, the node ID is 156. I'm going to come back to my view, and I'm going to confirm that I am still on front page book list 4 so that I'm editing the correct section. I'll select the node ID filter criteria and set that to 156. Now when I apply this display, my books have changed and I'm pulling them in from that 4th book list. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And once my view has saved, I can go and find the block it's created under Structure Blocks. And here we have Front Page Book List 4. I'm going to select Configure. We're going to call these my new bestsellers, set to the content region. And I'm again going to make sure that my visibility settings are set to how I want them. So in this case, only on the listed pages, and that page is the front. I'll save my block. And now when I go to my home page, I should have a 4th row. There we go. New bestsellers. Currently, those have dropped below my events, so remember to reorder your blocks. You can come to Structure Blocks, find the block in question, and just change the order in which it's listed. Going to click Save. And now the order has changed. Another customization that IndieCommerce users can do is to alter the number of cover images shown. As I mentioned earlier, by default, the mobile-friendly Booklist module will only display 6 cover images. That's standard for Indie Lite users and cannot be altered. However, IndieCommerce users can alter it by returning to the view, again through Structure, Views, Front Page Booklist, and we're going to change it from 6 to 4. So we're going to select Front Page Booklist 2. Under Pager, it's set to display a specified number of items. And we're going to click on 6 items and change that to 4. I only want to change it for this one right now. So I'm going to change the Apply option from All Displays to this block, and then select Apply this display. If I save that, my change should be updated, and I can go ahead and look at my front page again. So now my cookbooks are only showing 4 of the 6 ISBNs I placed, which just fit better here in this particular theme. Another way you can reach the view is by hovering over the block. So when you hover over the block, this little widget appears, and you can select Edit View. So again, I'm going to change the items from 6 to 4. And again, I only want to apply this change to my Front Page Booklist 3 option. So I'm going to select this block and then apply this display so that my changes only impact that option. And because I chose to get to it from the little widget around the block, once I save, it'll direct me straight back to the page I was previously on. And here now my new bestsellers and new and noteworthy are also only 4 blocks, and so is my Front Page Booklist 3. You can do the same thing to access the block itself. So in this case, my Front Page Booklist 3 doesn't have the title I want it to have. So I'm going to go ahead and hover over the little widget and select Configure Block. And that's going to bring me to the block settings. So I can change the title here. We'll call this New Romance. And we'll save that change. And now on my front page, I can see all of these blocks. You could choose to have one of these blocks on this page and have another on a different page. So let's go ahead and move my cookbook bestsellers. Instead of having it on my front page, I'm going to add it to my recommended reading page. So first, I want to check the path of my recommended reading page. So I'm going to open that page and copy the internal path. For those of you not familiar with what the internal path is, it's everything that comes after the slash in your URL. So I've copied that. I'm going to go ahead and open my block settings. And then I'm going to scroll down to my visibility settings. Instead of having it listed on the front, I'm going to change it to be recommended reading and save the block. So now when I come back to my recommended reading page, I can go ahead and find that on this page. If I scroll down, it should be at the very bottom here. There it is, my cookbook bestsellers grid. Now you don't necessarily just have to have this on one page. You could go ahead and configure the block again and have it on both pages. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my front page and click Save. And now not only is it on my recommended reading page, but if I go and visit my home page, it should be placed there again now as well. There it is. One of the really great features to this is that, as we're calling it, it's mobile friendly. So when you view this on various devices, such as a tablet or a mobile phone, it adjusts to fit the area of the display. Let's take a look at that. If you're using Chrome, then Chrome has a built-in feature that allows you to view your website on various devices. If you right-click on your screen and select Inspect, then you get this little icon that looks like two rectangles and one in front of the other. It's actually a mobile phone and a tablet. So if you select it, Chrome then gives you a toolbar, and you can select various devices to see what your site will look like on that device. So in this case, on an iPad, my mobile-friendly book list goes from being a row of 4 to a row of 3 and dropping my 4th book into a 2nd row. Let's take a look at a different device. On a Galaxy S5, it drops it to rows of 2. And how about an iPhone? There as well, it's also rows of 2. So this will be really useful for your customers who use their mobile devices to shop on your site a lot, because they'll still be able to see all your content without difficulty. Let's go ahead back. We'll come out of the mobile view, and you can do that just by clicking the little X here on the right-hand side. And let's go back to our home page. If you wanted to do this for your staff picks as well, you can do that by creating a page from scratch. So let's go ahead and set that up. We're going to go to Content, Add Content, Page. And let's call this Ryan Staff Picks. I don't need a body here, so I'm going to skip that. And I'm not going to enter my ISBNs one by one. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and save. And then I'm going to go to Content. And I want to get rid of the filter I set earlier, so I'm removing the title. And here's my Ryan Staff Picks. I'm going to select the page and then select the book list option. And I'm going to paste in a list of ISBNs. and I want to save this, but before I do, I want to make a note of what my node ID is. So here it is for node/157. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I have more than one employee, so I want to create another page. I'm going to do content, add content page again. And we're going to go ahead and create some staff pics for Scott. This time I'll go ahead and I'll do them one by one. And while that one pulls in, I'm going to go copy my next one. Select the Add Another Item button. Add another one. And we'll add one more. I bet some of you could probably read ISBNs off the top of your head. Unfortunately, I can't, so I have to copy and paste them. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this page. And let's go take a look at it. Scott Staff Pics. And there's my nice little book list. But I didn't make note of my node ID for this page, so I need to go obtain it. I'm going to click Edit. And here it is in the URL, 158. So now I'm going to create blocks for my staff pics. I'm going to go to I'm going to go to Structure, Views. I'm going to go back to my front page book list. I'm going to clone my first option again, front page book list 1. In this case, I'm going to change the display name to be Ryan Staff Pics and click Apply. I need to change my block name as well. And select Apply. And now I need to change my node ID. So I'm going to go ahead and change the node ID from 152 to 157. And it's always important to save your updates regularly so that you don't lose any work that you've been doing if you get called away to handle a customer or your phone rings. So anytime you see the all changes are stored temporarily message, it's a good idea to go ahead and click Save. So now that I've done Ryan's staff pics, I want to do one for Scott as well. So I'm going to go ahead and select Clone for Ryan's staff pics. And I'm going to change my display name. And my block name. I'll select Apply. And I need to also change my node ID to match Scott's book list. And choose Apply this display. Again, I'm going to go ahead and save. Now I'm going to go to Structure and Blocks and make sure that my 2 blocks were created. So if I scroll down to the disabled section, I should have a Ryan staff pics and a Scott staff pics, which I do, but I don't have a staff pic page to add them to yet. So first I need to do that. I'm going to come to Content, Add Content Page. Bear with me one moment. And I'm going to create a page called Staff Pics. And I'm even going to go ahead and while I'm here, place it in my menu. So I'm going to say provide a menu link, call this my staff picks from my main menu, and click save. So now I'm ready to place my blocks on the staff picks page. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my blocks. First, I'll configure Ryan's staff picks. So I'm clicking the configure option. I'll call this Ryan's favorites. I'm going to place it in the content region. I'm going to limit my visibility settings to be only the listed pages and staff picks. I'll save that block. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for Scott's staff picks. Select the configure option. We'll call this Scott's favorites. Set my region, and then my visibility settings. So now let's come out of the block administration area. Here I am on my front page. I have a menu option now that says staff picks. And when I select that, my two blocks are displaying here for Ryan's favorites and Scott's favorites. So it's really easy to utilize this in multiple places on your site. You can even utilize it in a different way. You could take advantage of some of the other block settings that are available by selecting Configure Block and coming down to the visibility settings. You could restrict this for specific roles or specific users. You could put it on all pages except specific pages. So for instance, in this case, let's go ahead and update this one. And just to see what that does, we're going to say all pages except those listed. So now instead of being on my staff picks page, it no longer displays there, but it displays on every other page of my site. So that's a really important reason why you want to always check your visibility settings, because you want it to display in the appropriate area. I'm going to go back and configure my block and set this back to only staff picks. So now that we've seen how you actually do this, let's go ahead and go back to our previous member samples and take a look at theirs again. We'll start with Sparta Books. And as you can see, they're just using it for the 3 default blocks. They've customized each of the 6 cover images, and they've named each section. So you have new YA titles, new children's books, and new adult titles. For Browsers Olympia, they're not only using the 3 default options for new fiction, new nonfiction, and new kids, but they've created additional blocks so that they can have their browser book club books, Olympia Interest, Poetry, Pacific Northwest, and the new in paperback. Then they've taken it and utilized it in another area for staff picks. So when you click on their staff picks page, you have another section for their staff members to have their favorite books listed. We also have Doylestown Bookshop using this feature. They've recently added it to their front page and are displaying it for new releases, pre-orders, and what we're reading. Another store using it is Katie Books. They've actually chosen to only use one of the available blocks, and their focus is on promoting pre-order books. So when you scroll down their page, you'll come to the section of pre-order these highly anticipated titles. And again, remember, it's mobile friendly. So when you right-click and choose the inspect element, you'll be able to see what it'll look like on various devices. So in this case, instead of being a row of 5, it's 3 rows of 2. You can get really specific with how you use this. Instead of using it for pre-orders, you could use it for local regional books or books by authors who live in your town. You could use it to curate and display your own list of bestsellers or books that are really popular to your store. And of course, pre-orders are always a really good idea of what to display on your front page. So at this point, we are going to open up for questions. I'm going to turn this back over to Geetha. So if you'll just bear with us for a moment. You gotta make me the presenter again.
Unmuted. Unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Thank you, Ryan, for that wonderful presentation. And now we are opening up for questions. And so we do have a couple of questions that came in during the presentation. And Ryan, I can read the questions. So if you want to go over the demonstration on the screen. So the first question is from Sally. Is there a way to put space between the covers vertically, like there is like a horizontal space between covers? I think in one of the presentations initially, the 2 covers were literally touching each other. I think that's what Sally is looking for.
Yes, we can do that by customizing the view.
Do you want to go into the details? Or we can send the information later.
I can give some details.
Okay.
Just don't. Sally, yes. We can. Okay, everyone should be able to hear me now. To add spacing, you would go and customize the view itself. So you would go to Structure, Views, and select your front page book list view. And ultimately, you would add in some CSS to the header or footer area. Now, the CSS you enter is going to vary slightly based on the theme you're using. So Sally, if you find that on your theme you do need spacing, you can just send us an email and we'll help you figure out what the appropriate CSS to enter is to give you the spacing you need. Okay, let's see. How do you change the formatting of block titles? By that, do you mean how do you make them a link? Or how do you make the font or color different? Sally, could you give us a little more information on that one? Okay, so for the font and color, that comes from your theme itself. So for instance, if you are using, in this case, we're using the corporate clean theme. So my blocks by default, I believe, have a blue heading. Let me just get back to the front page so that we can see it as I'm talking about it. So yes, the corporate clean theme, by default, the block titles are blue. Some of the themes will have settings under appearance, settings, and the block name in which you can control what color your titles are. So you would check that first by selecting appearance settings in the theme you're using. In my case, that's corporate clean, and seeing what theme controls you actually have. So in this case, I have a few options to adjust my colors. So I'm going to go ahead and change my headings link from this blue to, we'll make them orange for right now. I want to make sure I save my change, so I need to save configuration. And then I need to come back to my home page. So now my color is orange instead of blue. Not all the themes are going to have that built-in control. So if you're using a theme that doesn't, then that gets a little trickier to customize, but it could still be possible. Sally, if you want to send us an email later with what theme you're using, and we can take a look at it and help you figure out how you'd be able to adjust that. Okay, and I'm just checking for some other questions, if you'll bear with me a moment. Bear with us one moment. Okay, so we have the question of whether or not you can use this for custom products. Currently, it doesn't work well for custom products. The way in which book covers are pulled in and displayed already have specific coding placed on them, but we will continue to look into ways to make it work for other items. One of the things you want to keep in mind is for each theme itself, the number of covers you want to display is going to be based on the theme you're using. So while 4 cover images fit very well here, on the theme you're using, 6 might look better or 5 might look better. You could even use it just as one option. Let's take a look at another member site who's using this. Who has, instead of doing individual rows, individual blocks, just has one block with 3 rows of 4. For their Village Lights Recommend section. And again, for Doylestown, they're using it currently on their front page, but they could certainly use it for staff picks as well. If you're a store that has a members program, you could create a view and set it so that only your members could see that view when they log in. So you could have a whole section of books dedicated just to members. Sam, that is a possibility with a certain module enabled. It wasn't, Sam, the question you asked of, in the block configuration page, you have the option to add CSS. That is a module that can be specifically enabled for your site. It just happens to be enabled for the IndieCommerce bookshop site by default. So we can send you some more information about how that works for your site if it's something you're interested in. And I'm just looking at the second part of this question. Bear with me 1 second. Sam, that is a bit unusual that you don't have the drag and drop option. So we will take a look at your page and get back to you on that. It is a configuration that could be turned off. So we'll check to see if it's turned off on your site. Okay, we're going to give another minute or so for anyone else to type in any additional questions. And this webinar is recorded, so we will be placing a copy of it up in our webinar center. For those of you not familiar with it, you can access that by visiting bookweb.org. Once on bookweb.org, you can go to IndieCommerce. And from the IndieCommerce page, click on Webinars. A copy of every webinar we've previously held is provided here. And while you're here, you should also check out our training videos and our extensive help center. Bear with me a minute. We have another question. Okay, Sally, we will definitely take that suggestion into consideration of sending out notes to you ahead of time so that you can have some ideas ready for questions that you want to ask. Minty, thank you. We're glad that you found it helpful. Okay, following the end of this webinar, you will receive a survey for how it went in a few hours or possibly tomorrow. Feel free to give us your comments there as well. Your comments will help us to improve for future webinars. And make sure that you look for the announcement and the link to sign up for our webinar next week for the bulk upload of custom products. That will be presented next Thursday, September 28th from 2 to 3:30, and it's bound to be really good, so make sure you sign up. Thank you from the IndieCommerce team, and we look forward to hearing from all of you next week.